So when you think of Saudi Arabia, what comes to mind? Probably two things, right? Vast, endless deserts and unimaginable oil wealth. But there's this deep paradox at the very heart of the kingdom. It's a land of incredible riches, but at the same time, it's one of the most water-poor nations on the entire planet. So let's dive into how they're tackling this existential threat.
I mean, we're talking about a kingdom literally built on sand. It is the largest country in the world without a single permanent natural river. Just try to wrap your head around that. Almost the entire nation is scorching desert, a place where rain feels more like a myth than a reality.
And yet, hidden right under those silent dunes, an absolute engineering marvel is taking shape. They are literally building their own rivers, a massive underground network of pipelines that's designed to bring life to the desert, stretching for thousands and thousands of kilometers.
Which, of course, brings us to the giant question of this whole explainer. In a country with basically zero fresh water, where is all this water coming from? And how on earth are they pulling off what seems like an impossible feat of engineering?
Okay, so to really get the solution, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the problem they're up against. It's a fundamental challenge that has defined the nation pretty much since it began.
You know, this quote just nails the dilemma perfectly. All the money in the world, but this constant, desperate thirst. And that imbalance pushed the kingdom towards some pretty radical solutions, especially after they realized their first big attempt was, well, a catastrophic mistake.
See, before they started building rivers, they tried mining for water, and for a while, it worked. It led to this temporary boom, but it was a strategy with a ticking clock, one that was pushing the country to the absolute brink of a water crisis.
For decades, Saudi Arabia was surviving on something called fossil water. Now, this is not your typical groundwater that gets refilled by rain. No, this is ancient water, trapped in deep underground aquifers since the last ice age. And here's the most critical part. It's a finite resource. Once you pump it out, it is gone forever.
And this timeline, wow, it shows you just how fast that resource vanished. It all kicked off in the 70s with this really ambitious goal, to be self-sufficient in food. So the government poured a ton of money into growing wheat, right in the middle of the desert. The ambition was huge, but the cost was devastating. By 2003, farming was gulping down a staggering 85% of the country's water. Then in 2016, the final alarm bell. NASA data confirmed the aquifers were disappearing at an unbelievable rate. Just let that number sink in for a second. 85%. This wasn't just a leak, it was like opening a floodgate on a finite reservoir. All of that precious, irreplaceable water was being used to grow crops in one of the driest places on Earth.
This analogy really says it all. They were draining their only natural water source with absolutely no way to recharge it. The country had to pivot, and they had to do it fast. The fossil water experiment was officially over.
And that pivot led to this, one of the most ambitious engineering projects in modern history. The thinking was, if you can't find water under the ground, you'll just have to make it from the sea, and then build your own river to move it around.
The scale of this thing is it's hard to even comprehend. The total planned length of this underground river is 12,000 kilometers. Now, to put that into perspective, the Nile, the longest river on Earth, is about 6,600 kilometers long. So they're building an artificial river network that's almost twice the length of the Nile.
And the volume? It's just as wild. The system is designed to produce and move 9.4 million cubic meters of fresh water every single day. That's enough to fill almost 4,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools daily. But here's the catch. A feat like this comes with a huge energy bill. The water doesn't just flow on its own, it has to be pushed. And pumping all that water from the coast, across huge deserts, and even up mountains, well, it eats up an incredible 9% of the entire country's electricity. That is a massive carbon footprint just for water.
So how in the world do they make all this fresh water in the first place? Well, the magic happens along the coasts, in these massive industrial plants that use technology to turn the endless salt water of the sea into something you can drink. It's called desalination.
They mainly use two big methods. The first is called multi-stage distillation. The easiest way to think about it is like a giant industrial-scale kettle. They boil seawater, capture the pure steam, and cool it back down into fresh water. It takes a ton of energy, but it's great for huge volumes. The second, more modern method is reverse osmosis. This is much more high-tech. It uses incredible pressure to force seawater through a filter so fine that only pure water molecules can squeeze through. leaving all the salt behind. It's way more efficient, and it's where the whole industry is heading.
Okay, so this whole thing sounds like a technological miracle, right? A perfect solution to an impossible problem. But creating this much fresh water from the ocean doesn't come for free. There's a serious and often hidden consequence.
Because, every solution has its own set of problems. When you take the salt out of billions of liters of seawater, you have to ask a pretty simple question. Where does all of that salt go? 329,000 tons. It's a number so big it's almost hard to picture. So, for scale, think about the heaviest animal on Earth, the blue whale. It weighs about 200 tons. Well, that is the weight of the toxic, chemical-filled salt waste, they call it brine, that these plants produce every single day. And all of that stuff has to go somewhere.
And that somewhere is right back into the ocean. This brine is way saltier and warmer than normal seawater. And when they dump it back, it creates these toxic plumes that just starve the water of oxygen. It suffocates marine life, creates dead zones on the seafloor, and it threatens the entire fragile coastal ecosystem, especially in a unique place like the Red Sea.
Now, the good news is they know this is a huge new problem, and they're looking for solutions. One idea is to use deep-sea diffusers to spread the brine out over a much bigger area, kind of diluting its impact. But a more exciting idea is something called brine mining, basically developing tech to pull valuable minerals out of the waste, which could turn a major pollutant into a profitable new resource. Pretty cool, right?
So Saudi Arabia's journey from draining ancient aquifers to building a man-made river is a really powerful story. It's a huge testament to human ingenuity, but it's also a stark warning about the consequences that come with our solutions.
And that really brings us to our final question. The country without a river is now a world leader in water technology. They're even hosting the World Water Forum in 2027. So they solved their water problem, but in doing that, they created a massive energy problem and a new environmental threat. It just leaves you wondering, are we really solving scarcity, or are we just getting better at changing its shape?